Perfect. All right. It looks like we are now live streaming and I don't see anybody else in the waiting room at this time. So I just want to welcome everyone to the meeting. Thank you so much for joining us. If we haven't met, my name is Jasmine Patrick and I'll be helping moderate the meeting once again today. Before I officially pass off the meeting to the mayor, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from my office where I'm an uninvited guest on the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. So on that note, Mayor O'Connor, I'll pass it over to you for welcome remarks.
Thank you, Jasmine. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by recognizing that although everyone on this meeting tonight is spread far and wide around our province, I would like to acknowledge that we're here tonight to talk about Lytton, located in the center of the traditional territory of the Ntlaka'pamux people. Today is March 30th. It marks exactly 21 months since the fire. In just 3 months' time, 2 years will have passed. Today I had someone ask me, how's the rebuilding going? I think you can only imagine what my answer was. Anyway, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting tonight. We have people on here from various agencies and levels of government, community members, and of course the residents, I hope, of the village of Lytton. I say I hope because I can't see everybody that's on, because it is the residents that this meeting is for. This evening, we're going to hear from United Way. I'm curious to hear what Ryan has to say about the Healing Initiative. Also, we'll hear from Colin O'Leary, whose camera isn't working today, so we'll be hearing from him, as I said, giving us a presentation on the work being done on economic recovery. We'll also hear updates from Matt Lane regarding the contaminated soils in the village, and from Heritage Branch regarding archaeology. Like all of the residents and community members listening in, Mayor and Council are also here to hear the updates and to ask questions. We encourage you out there to ask questions of the presenters, either by raising your hand or typing in the chat. It's so important that we get the most up-to-date information and that we have our questions answered. So saying that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor O'Connor. I believe we have Brittany Lang here today, who's here on behalf of MP Brad Viss, and I believe she has a short update to provide to us.
Thanks, Jasmine. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brittany Lang, constituency manager for Brad Viss, MP. He sends his regrets. He's in the House of Commons as we speak for late night votes happening right now. Yeah, just a short update. My coworker and I, we were happy to be up in Lytton a few weeks ago, earlier this month, to collect signatures for a petition. The petition is seeking Canada Emergency Bank Account, the CEBA loan forgiveness for businesses in Lytton and the surrounding region, recognizing that the deadline is up at the end of this year. And Lytton businesses haven't been able to open doors for revenue in almost 2 years. Big shout out goes to Mayor O'Connor, the Fandriches, Richard Forrest, Jan Polderman, Lytton First Nation, Scapa First Nation, the ladies in the Lytton Pines, and so many of you for adding your signatures to the petition and for collecting more signatures. We have approximately 75 that have been received in Ottawa, and they've been sent to the clerk's office where they get certified. And then MP Viss is given an opportunity. He gets put in a line to be able to speak in the House of Commons directly to the minister on this issue. And what's great about official House of Commons petitions is that the government is required by legislation to provide a response within 45 days. We've been working on this relentlessly with Minister Ng, but we really haven't gotten anywhere. So we're excited to get an official response on CEBA loan forgiveness for businesses in Lytton. The petition is available online to download. It does have to be a paper petition and then send original copies into Ottawa. I'll put the link in the chat if anyone wants to download the petition and collect some more signatures. We need 25 to be a complete petition. And signatories, they don't have to be living in Lytton. They don't have to be business owners, just need Canadian Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Calls for proposal for the Rapid Housing Initiative have now closed. The RHI is the $1 billion in federal funding allocated for projects, which include new housing or rehabilitation upgrades to housing for vulnerable communities. It's administered through Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and is designed for quick construction. NPVIS is happy to support Lytton on this, support Lytton's application, and we've written to the Minister of Housing and the President of CMHC. And lastly, I have the federal budget dropped on Tuesday. There's some positives for our riding and for the Lytton area specifically. I could go on to a commentary about the mass amounts of debt that this budget brings, but I won't. For the view of public safety and disaster recovery, there is $31.7 million over 3 years to public safety and CMHC to work with the Department of Finance to stand up low-cost flood insurance programs. Recognizing how expensive it is for homeowners to get insurance, they're looking at creating a system to lower that cost. Unfortunately, it looks like it's only going to be for flood and not for fire. Yeah, and then the other funding that totals over 60 million will go towards identifying high-risk areas. But unfortunately, none of the additional funds were pledged to actually build infrastructure to protect against fire and flood. There's still some good things in there. 2 other provisions of note for our riding that's positive. There's a tradesperson tools deduction it doubles the deduction for equipment for tradespeople, and an expansion of the dental care benefit. And that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brittany. I also want to acknowledge that we have Parliamentary Secretary Russell here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have both Parliamentary Secretary Russell and Brittany for the first part of the meeting here. So if you do have any questions for either one of them, please put those in the chat and I will get to them sooner rather than later before they head off. So if you don't know how to use the chat yet, I will go through all the instructions in just a second. So on that note, I'd like to reiterate, as Mayor O'Connor mentioned, that the purpose of today's session is to provide an update and an opportunity for residents to ask questions and provide you with the latest on the recovery and the rebuild initiatives that we have this month and moving forward. I want to give you a quick glance at the agenda here that Sierra is putting up for me. So as Mayor O'Connor mentioned, we'll be hearing from the United Way, the Business Economic Recovery Plan. We've got an update on contaminated soils and an archaeology reporting. We have archaeological submission and process going forward. So those are the topics that we're going to cover today. After all of the updates are done, we're going to open up the entire session for questions. There are a few rules for participation today, as always, so please focus your questions on topics that are applicable to the community as a whole. But staff are very happy to answer your individual questions if you have them, but please email those to communication@lytton.ca and we'll make sure that the right person gets back to you. Please use appropriate language, refrain from using any profanities or abusive language. Negative comments toward any individuals on the call will be removed from the session. So please refrain from any inappropriate language. We ask that you only ask one question at a time if possible, but please feel free to raise your hand as many times as you want after that. And finally, if there are any media in the meeting in the meeting room today, we ask that you please hold your questions and email them to communication@lytton.ca for response after the meeting, as we want to focus on residents today. So just in case you're not familiar with Zoom, I'll take a couple minutes to explain how to use the platform. So first, at the bottom of your screen, as I was mentioning earlier, you'll see a chat button. So if you click that, the chat box is going to pop up on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can use that chat box to send us your questions today if you'd rather write them in. And at the end of the meeting, as I mentioned, there's going to be an opportunity to ask your questions out loud. So to do that, you just use the raise hand function. So if you scroll to the bottom of your screen there, you're going to find a button that says reactions, and then you just click raise hand from there. I don't think anyone's calling in tonight, but just in case, if you're using a landline telephone, you can definitely still participate. So *6 is to mute or unmute yourself, and then *9 is to raise your hand, and that'll just let me know that you have a question. If you do have any struggles throughout the meeting and need any tech help, please just email communication@lytton.ca, and I'll try my best to help you out. All right, okay, so now we're going to move right on to the update section of the meeting. So again, please hold your questions for any of the speakers until after all of the presenters have spoken. But please feel free, as I mentioned, to put them in the chat as you think of them. So no need to hold them, and I'll collect them and read them out loud for you if you don't want to speak out loud. All right, so first on the list tonight, I believe we have Ryan Denault from the United Way, and he's going to be talking about the United Way Healing Initiative.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for giving me some time to speak tonight. I really appreciate it. I am speaking to you guys tonight from my traditional territory here in the interior. I'm actually on the traditional territory of the Tecumseh-Tishoquapan and the Skitcheston Indian Band. I'm a Skitcheston Indian Band member, so very, very happy to be walking around on this land here, especially today. I actually went for a walk this morning, on the North Thompson River, right on the sand dunes in Kamloops. Went for a walk with a really dear friend of mine, and at one point we actually sat down in the sand right by the river, and it was 15 degrees out. Hadn't felt that level of warmth outside yet this year, so I felt very, very blessed and very lucky to do so. So I thought I would share that with everybody. Some of the over the last 6 months, there have been a number of conversations that I've been involved in around providing different levels of healing for different community members. And so I've been in conversations with Kanakabar Indian Band, Lytton First Nation, Siska First Nation, Scrupa, the village itself, looking at a bunch of different ways that we can provide some opportunities for the communities to come together and start some healing initiatives. We haven't had a lot of success in that. And so what I decided to do was actually start to go out to each individual nation and the village itself and just start some micro initiatives with some funding envelopes that are really driven by the communities themselves. So it was really important to me and to the United Way that we didn't come in here pretending that we had an understanding of what people needed to heal. What we wanted to do was sit down and listen and react accordingly and try to think outside of the box and try to do some different things. And so we've had some really good success with that to start with. And we've probably got about 4 or 5 different initiatives that are all going on at the same time, with 2 of them now to the point where we can start to advertise that we're going to do something. So in April, I've been working with Noni to come up with a couple of different ideas. And one of the ideas that we've got right now that we can talk about is on April 20th. Fortunately, the Kumshin Rafting Resort is going to open up again here on April 1st. And on April 20th, we're going to use their front space, their coffee cafe space, to invite everybody from the community to come in and just have coffee, to be able to sit down. We're going to bring some desserts and stuff like that to just have the community come sit down and just have some discussions with each other. During that time, we'll be listening to hear if there are other things that start to come up that the community is looking for, and hopefully we'll be able to react to that to do something further, whether it's some healing circles or whether it's bringing in certain kinds of traditional or Western healers. We're just going to be there to listen and hopefully be able to react. So we're going to start with that. That's going to be from 11 till 2, like I said, on April 20th. One of the other things that we're going to do is we're going to use the bus system that we've coming out of Ashcroft and Cache Creek. And we're going to pick people up in Ashcroft and Cache Creek that are displaced if they'd like to come and spend a few hours at the Kumsheen Cafe. So that's going to be the first initiative that we start with. The second thing that we're going to do is on April 22nd, we are going to, oh, just one sec. We're going to do a prayer walk. And I've been working with Angus Muir from the Lytton Anglican Church. And what he's going to do is he wants to do a prayer walk through the community prior to the rebuild. This is open to anybody that would like to come with any kind of spiritual practice to come and just walk through the community, do some prayer, do some blessings for the community prior to the rebuild. They're going to do that from 10 till 12 on April 22nd. And then we're organizing some form of a lunch right now. We don't have the exact details on that, so we will continue to get that out in the community as we sort of wrap our heads around how we're gonna do that. We still have to solidify some of that, so Angus would like me to give out his phone number for anybody that would like to contact him, anybody that would like to do some different things or would like to collaborate and be a part of that. So his phone number is 250-319-8823. I'll put that up on the meeting chat as well. I'll also put my phone number and my email address up on the chat as well. If there's anybody else in the community or outside of the community that would like to, that has any initiatives that they're thinking of, any healing opportunities, any initiatives to bring people together to talk about some of the things that they've been through, anything that we think that can help the community while we're going through this rebuild, please reach out to me. And we can have a discussion about what I can do to help and how I can help facilitate having more events like this. So this is the start of what I hope to be something that we're doing all the time, bringing in 2 to 3 to 4 different things a month that we can do to help bring the community back together while we go through this. So again, I really want to thank you for allowing me the time to speak. I really, really appreciate it. I'm very, very happy to be here and to be helping to be doing this work. And thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate you being here as well. All right. Next on the list of updates, we have Colin O'Leary, who's going to provide us with an update on the Business Economic Recovery Plan. I know his camera isn't working, as the mayor mentioned, but he does have a great presentation for us today. So I'll pass it over to you, Colin.
Excellent. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm just going to bring up the presentation right now. Can everybody see that?
We can. Yep. Thanks.
Yes. Excellent. So first of all, right off the hop, I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to do this presentation. I'm really excited about it. And and it was so interesting, Mayor O'Connor, that you had mentioned the 2-year mark, because I've been really pouring through a lot over the last 2 weeks, really pouring through a lot of data and a lot of previous documents and really looking at timelines. And we constructed a very interesting visual timeline, but it really was resonating with me as well that we are really coming up on that. And it is pretty amazing when you look at kind of what's happening. And I also have to say, Ryan, I am so happy to hear your presentation. That is absolutely amazing, because one of the things, I don't think it's in my presentation, but it was very clearly identified, it's in the report, is that a space to congregate is so important for people. People are really talking about that sense of community, and actually getting together as a sense of community is being very, very important as far as the recovery process. And not only that, also a lot of emphasis, and I threw in a special slide because I saw that you were presenting on the agenda about mental health support and like the need for all of that. So I'm really glad to hear that that is coming. And so, yeah, for everybody on the call, this is just a very, very high overview, snapshot of some of the things that have been found through the survey. The actual economic recovery plan is about a 100-page long document with short, medium, and long-term action items, a lot of actually really concrete and great kind of things that can start happening in the community, which I'm excited about. We're going to start off, first of all, with just a survey overview. So if we look at the overall survey, in total, we had 119 responses, of which there's 31 business owners that participated in the survey. So that is an excellent response rate from the region and from the business community, which is really excellent. We did leave the survey open a little longer than originally planned, and I'm glad that we did because we got that extra little bump at the end. Overall, we had over 52 hours of community engagement through 26 stakeholder interviews. Some of those key stakeholders we had multiple interviews with, and really appreciative for everybody taking their time to talk to us. Within that 26 stakeholder interviews, we had 9 business owners, 13 organizations and residents, and 4 elected officials. If we take a look at the who was responding and where they were located, we had about 51% of the people that were actually physically located within the village of Lytton, the municipality. That's where they identified where they're from. We also had about 29% of people that were from the region surrounding the village of Lytton, so in very close proximity to the village. We had about 11% of people that identified as being from other locations. Those spread out kind of all over the province, but we also had a very large representation actually from a number of different bands actually in the region that participated, which was excellent, and other communities. And then we had about 9% of our participants that were from Lytton First Nations, which is excellent. Overall, if we actually look at that, we always like to do a bit of a test to see if there's statistical significance in our data, and we do have the data is extremely statistically significant, which is excellent. We're sitting at about a 98% confidence level, the margin of error of only about 10%, which is fantastic. Right away, one of the biggest questions that we are getting from a lot of people in the community is they're really wondering if people are actually planning on restarting their business. In the surrounding region, there's a lot of trepidation and uncertainty with people. People were worried about whether the village and businesses were planning on coming back. And so this graph is a quick summary of actually a couple of questions pushed together. The first 2 questions kind of looked at, the question was, do you plan on rebuilding and restarting your business in Lytton or the surrounding region? And the other part of the question was actually, did you have a business or was your business lost in the wildfire or was it not? So those 2 questions are kind of put together. And we can see here that only 4.2% of businesses that were not lost in the fire have decided to permanently close. There's about 12.5% of businesses that were lost in the fire and people are not planning on rebuilding them right now. Now, I will add a caveat to this. When we start to really get into the data, there's a lot of uncertainty, and people have indicated very clearly over and over again that without support, in particular financial support, they're not able to actually rebuild. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to. We had about 25% of businesses lost in the fire said yes, that they do plan on restarting. And there's about 58% of businesses that were lost in the fire and, that were lost and do plan on rebuilding. So we did a bit of a breakdown when we actually get into it, and we looked at how much kind of direct impact are we looking at, and what are the different categories. And again, this is a very high level snapshot. There is so much information in this report that I'm very excited to actually share with everybody. If we put it into a PowerPoint presentation, I'd be talking to you for 6 hours straight, easy. But this just gives you a really high snapshot overview of like some of the different kind of categories and different levels of data that we did collect through the survey, which will be really helpful going forward, especially for funding providers that might want to specialize in a specific area of providing support. So we tried to quantify overall, what are we actually looking at? And so this question was, how much financial loss did your business experience in the summer directly due to the wildfires? And we can see that we've got about $3 million in equipment. Most businesses reported about $200,000 in average. Buildings totaled about $16 million, with about $1 million in average commercially for businesses. Lost sales were about $6.75 million almost, with about $475,000 in average. Inventory was about $2 million, and overall businesses estimated that at least 27, almost 28 million of financial loss in 2021 due directly to the wildfires. So that's adding all of that up together, give you a quantification of the economic impact. We asked businesses flat out, where do they need the most support? Where do they feel like they need the most support? And the highest results that we're kind of getting, these are lumped categories or themes from a whack load of responses that we received. So these are the kind of key themes that emerged out of the data. Business related expenses, number one, and general financing support is number two right after that. This is a consistent thread through all the data. I can tell you as short, medium, and long-term recommendations and going through everything. Financing and financial support is absolutely critical for businesses to recover and for the village to recover. Infrastructure support came as kind of like a next, after those first two, kind of was very high up there, followed by permitting and licensing support, business planning, employee expenses, and business management support. There's lots of very specific examples inside of all these buckets, which are in the report, which will outline what these mean to different people. And I won't get into too much of it right now, but there's lots of opportunities for delivering programming. We did have a question which asked, what gaps exist for recovery for business owners affected by the Lytton and region wildfire? And one of the things that we did is we actually asked people what short, medium, and long-term gaps existed. And this word cloud is really just the fastest way we could kind of convey some of that data to everyone. Again, in the report, we have much finer, granular level of detail for recommendations and impacts and what people are kind of thinking. And for those of you, pretty much everybody's seen a word cloud these days, but if you haven't, basically how a word cloud works is it's a graphical representation of data, and it allows your brain to very quickly interpret what that data looks like. The more frequently a term is mentioned, the larger the font that will appear. So you can see here, when I look at this right off the hop, I'm seeing critical infrastructure is, again, very large. Funding clarification is very, very large there in the front. And that is something that we see a lot. So we know that there is some funding that's available. Really the big question that just keeps coming up over and over again as well, what is it going to be available to use for? Which I know that a lot of those providers were looking for the need, like what is the specific need that needs to be addressed? And that is why this project, this economic recovery project that we've done, is so important, because we have identified dozens and dozens of very specific needs that can be addressed now, hopefully by funding agencies, but also other organizations like Ryan denotes a really good example with United Way. And United Way is an amazing organization, and stuff Ryan's doing is amazing. And a lot of the times, by having the data or some of these gaps identified, these organizations that are sitting on the sidelines will now realize, wait a minute, that's in our realm of what we can do. We can start delivering that services right away. And Ryan's already on it for some of the things that were identified, but there's many more that can be serviced by many more different organizations out there. We can also see stuff like lack of planning. There's and lack of cooperation. There is an underlying kind of level here, and sometimes it manifests as communication. People talking about communication, but there's a feeling like there's multiple processes that are happening, but they're overall uncoordinated, and it doesn't feel like there's a continuous thread through everything. So some of our recommendations look to actually leverage the recovery manager and other organizations to help them with clear communication, but also ensuring that we do have a regular touch point where all these processes are convening into a central location, and we are actually getting more of a coherent path going forward. So you'll see that a little bit later. Questions around insurance. This is another huge one. I know we still have some questions. We got some answers, but we still have lots of questions. We asked people flat out, did you have insurance coverage for any of the losses that you incurred due to the wildfire? Now, you can see here that we have about a third of the people said this wasn't applicable to them. They did not necessarily directly lose assets in the fire. That's why they said not applicable. For the people who did lose assets and are impacted, about 50% of them said that, a little more than 50% said that they did have some insurance coverage, but about 50% also said that they did not. So what we did is we actually asked people, even though you had insurance, because a lot of people expressed that, sure, I've got insurance, but actually the appraised value of coverage was nowhere near what the rebuild costs are actually looking like. And what we did is we asked people, okay, whether you have insurance or not, how much more money do you need to actually rebuild? So we're looking at just the shortfall here. And again, this is really really encouraging for me when I look at this, because the overall business shortfall that was voluntarily identified by all these businesses combined was under $15 million. So I start to look at some of these recovery envelopes that are available out there, and it's kind of thinking like, this is in the realm of possibility, which is really good to know. We also looked at home rebuild shortfalls, which is around 7 million in total. So the reason that we looked at some housing components within the economic recovery plan is because it's very apparent early on, and we see this with a lot of other data, that housing is intrinsically linked. Actually, homes and people being able to move back to their homes is intrinsically linked to an economic recovery. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but homes represent people, people represent customers and labor or workforce for an economy. So if businesses can't go and open up without anybody moving back to their home, because the businesses will last about 3 months, then they'll implode due to a lack of labor and or income. Likewise, you're not going to get people moving back into their home if there's no services or amenities or businesses downtown, which is why our economic recovery plan recommends a coordinated approach, a timed coordinated approach that is going to bring both groups together at the same time so that we get the best chance possible for economic recovery. We asked people, have you relocated after the 2021 fire? Because there's a lot of people that had kind of left the region. Early reports were saying upwards of 1,000 people were displaced all over the province to various communities. A number of those people have come back, but we still have a large number of people displaced. And out of our stakeholders who are engaged through the economic recovery project, about 36% of them are still displaced, are still not living in the region. So the big question for them, and this is the question we only ask the people that had left, do you plan to rebuild or move back to Lytton or the region in the future? And the good news is the vast majority of them, about 2/3 of them, said flat out, yes, we definitely want to come back. We've been waiting to come back. We're just waiting for the situation where we can come back. We had about 23% of people that said no. And this is partially a factor of the fact that it has taken a very long time to kind of get to the stage that we're at. We still have more time in front of us, looking at kind of projected timelines. And what's happened is people, quite frankly, they've moved on with their lives. And not everybody can kind of wait for this long, especially when funding to kind of keep them going is getting depleted basically daily. So this really speaks to the imperative that everybody already feels, which is that we really need to start to be able to get people back into the community as fast as possible, is really the idea. And I know there's a lot of obstacles that are stopping that from happening, but there's ways that we might be able to make that happen sooner rather than later. And again, we had about 12% of people that said that they're unsure. When we actually look at the unsure data, almost everybody that started saying unsure, they really, when you drill down and you ask them further, they're unsure because they didn't know if there's going to be support programs there, mainly financial support programs there, for them to move back. And it was pretty clear that if they had financial support, they would move back. But they are not going to be able to do that unless they do have a little bit of extra help. So again, these are some of these kind of like other unsure sort of answers. Again, I've already spoken to some of these. It's taken too long. We need stability in our lives, so we settle a new community. It really depends on financial support for rebuilding. We would like to move back to Lytton. However, this would all depend on if there is any home or business financial rebuilding support. And if no home and business rebuild support, most people, including myself, will not be able to be moving back. So one of the other key topics that kind of popped up, if we're going to prioritize, so we have limited resources, right? We have limited capacity and limited resources. One of the big things that we need to do when we look at economic recovery is we need to prioritize our actions. We need to do things in a coordinated, planned method so that we are making the biggest impact possible and we're taking appropriate steps. And so one of the things that we did is we identified what are the priority amenities and businesses that need to come back pretty much immediately in order to be able to get like a functional town effectively so that we can get the people back. Healthcare actually topped this list, the hospital and healthcare, which surprised me because anecdotally talking to everybody, I was expecting grocery store to get the top list, but the hospital and or healthcare services actually trumped that just slightly. And there could be an opportunity as well right now with the PCN planning and primary healthcare transformation process the Ministry of Health is currently rolling out right now to be able to kind of at least get a UPCC operating, which is an urgent primary care center, and a short-term sort of period of time. And so we can kind of go from there. And the nice thing about that is that can also bring jobs along with it, actually, as well, fairly well-paying jobs. So, of course, we have the grocery store soon after that, which we hear about quite a bit. Pharmacy is right up there, followed by a restaurant, and not just a restaurant, but there's coffee shop is up here. And actually, a lot of the topics around a coffee shop and a restaurant, what it actually came down to is people are saying, we need a place to congregate as a community, to have a sense of community, to be able to talk to people, to be able to reconnect with people, which is really, again, why I was excited to hear about Ryan's presentation and the things that are going to be happening in the short term, because I think it really is a need that's clearly identified. We also have other amenities like a bank and a hotel. So this word cloud, again, pulls together a lot of data, and it's a very high level look at it, but we ask people what actions can be taken or what programs can be developed in the short, medium, or long term to help businesses recover, businesses in Lytton and the region to recover. And, you know, again, looking at this very quickly, we can see affordable housing, which is a problem all over the province, quite frankly, but it's not just affordable housing, though I know that comes up quite a bit. I think housing and or interim housing, or doing whatever is possible to kind of get people back here, and the housing situation was definitely something that we heard a lot about. Of course, you can see rebuild the grocery store right in the middle there. Financial support is probably the largest font that's on this. And again, it was a thread through short, medium, and long term. Supporting residents in the rebuild, grants for businesses, communicate plans, business diversification. Actually, it's interesting. You could really see a shift with short-term actions really focused around critical infrastructure, critical core businesses, getting community members back into the community. Medium-term actions really kind of start talking about adding amenities and adding more livability features to the community, and actually adding like more secondary, tertiary businesses. And then long-term recovery actually started getting into some neat ideas around economic diversification, economic development support, interesting ideas for rebuilding, such as like a multiplex building or something that can actually house multiple facilities or multiple functions within the community, and kind of neat things along those lines. Do you have any other information or comments that could assist us with our economic analysis and economic recovery plan moving forward? I mean, this one I think is kind of to stop procrastinating, kind of like caught me and made me laugh. I think everybody is wanting this to move forward as fast as possible. I would say that really, like, if you look at the timeline, we built a very detailed timeline. It was based, quite frankly, on a timeline that was built by others, the former CAO and a few other people. And what we did is we expanded and built on it more. And I think it's really important to communicate that. We included in our economic recovery plan because nobody's been procrastinating, quite frankly. There has been so much stuff happening on so many different fronts. There's just been a lot of challenges. I think that's what's happened. And so there hasn't been procrastination, but I think that people want to start to, I think getting people back into the community really has to be a huge, huge priority ultimately, though, with everything we're doing. And that's what we're trying to do. And then again, stuff like support for the entire region was something else that was really identified, and actually partnerships, which I'm not seeing there, but I'll get into that more later. So key themes, just wanted to kind of get a touch again on some key themes without taking too much time tonight. But I just snagged this slide. This is this extra slide that I threw in there because I saw the agenda and United Way. And do you feel that mental health resources are available in the community to meet the needs of those who need support? 83% of people said no that participated in that responded survey. And I think one of the things that we often overlook when we look at a community and we look at economics or a business or economic recovery is we overlook sometimes mental health support. But in actual fact, the number one asset of any business is the owner or CEO. And with all the trauma and everything that's been happening, I actually include some medical research papers that show that trauma lasts for a very long time. And when everybody's impacted like this in a large scale in a community, what happens is people have a hard time with decisions. They have a hard time moving forward. There's increased animosity. There's actually can be other issues like increased substance abuse. And so mental health support is absolutely critical, and even included in like economic recovery. We need to get everybody functioning on a good level mentally in order to be able to get an economy really kickstarted. Communication and collaboration. Again, very consistent. People not working together effectively. We are stronger together, and it doesn't make sense not to work together. So I think there's a lot of really great initiatives that are happening out there. And, I combed around and got updates and read everything I could possibly read on everything that's happening. And it's all good stuff. But it does, I'm not going to lie, it definitely even feels disjointed to me. And like there isn't a lot of communication and collaboration. I will say that like everybody has excellent intentions. That's the important part. And the good news is we can pull this together for people. We can actually do this. This is stuff that's in our economic recovery plan. And I think it's going to make a really big difference for everybody. And we also want to show people that we're responding to what they're saying. And a lot of times there can actually be a lot of kind of confusion or misunderstanding. So, a lot of people are saying communication is the problem. I see this a lot in actually a lot of economic disaster situations, economic recovery situations where people are saying like, there's no communication. And then you actually look at, staff or agencies, and they're actually pumping out piles of communication, like over and over and over. Like they're communicating more than they've ever communicated before ever. And a lot of people get really confused because they're like, well, all we've been doing is communicating. Why are people saying we're not communicating? And the problem is that you can actually put out too much communication. It can actually be overwhelming for people, and they can't find the resources that they want to actually find. And so that's where this is kind of an interesting thing where, people have a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to this, but really what it's about effective communication, not volume, but effectiveness. And one of the things that can really help actually is integrating a lot of stuff like infographics and very simple kind of reporting timesheets and reporting kind of almost placemats and dashboards. And we're going to actually show, we included in our recovery plan some examples of what that looks like. I know Colliers is coming up here later. I've read actually through a lot of these, the Colliers community updates, which is great. You got there's a little bit of that like dashboard at the top that's like, urgent, or I can't remember, it's all color coded. But one of the things I will say is even though those are going out, just my own 2 cents, they're hard to read and hard to follow. I'm a pretty technical person and can read stuff, and I understand construction. And so I think that it's not for lack of effort. I think it's really good that those reports are coming out. I think with like some small tweaks, we can actually make it so that community, like residents, can understand them better. And I think it would really help everything. So again, it's just small tweaks to what's already happening to really improve efficiency. Again, this is another good example of like that communication confusion. So announcements are made with little information to guide the direction. So a really good example is funding is announced, yet no clarity on who it will support or how it'll work. So that's again the sort of stuff where it's like the bits of information that people are looking for are kind of they're having a hard time finding it, or they feel like it's missing. And so that's a really good example of that. The village must build strong working relationships with the First Nations in the area and strengthen the relationships with regional, provincial, and federal governments. I think we're already on a good path to do this. Let's keep it up. We're stronger together, and there's no need to duplicate services. We can actually leverage and support each other and actually get ahead in the long run a lot faster. And need in-person communication opportunities for residents. Example, coffee shop. It's not just a coffee shop though. One of the other things that's actually was identified as one of these critical infrastructure pieces over and over again is the residents want the municipal hall rebuilt. They want a place where they can actually access like staff, and they can ask questions in person, and they can actually see, honestly, I feel like it's a feeling thing. It's one of those heart things, not a brain thing, where it's like they want to see the heart of the village kind of coming back. And so that's something, when we look at like maybe prioritizing municipal structures, that might be something you might want to move up the list if it's not already on the top. Financing and funding. I've mentioned it probably a dozen times. This presentation, the report is got, I bet you if I search through the data, the word funding or financing would come up over 1,000 times. So this is the part that we need to figure out, and we got to leverage different levels of government. It doesn't have to be all Pacific Can, but we can help. Pacific Can is a great chunk of money to start with, but we can really look at where can we use these funds most effectively to get the village and the economy going again. Insurance, this is something I'll throw out here with this is that a lot of the data that we collected was before that last kind of insurance update that we got. So I think that a lot of the uncertainty around insurance, I think there's still uncertainty, but I think that there was some clarity has been added. I think that some of the comments and questions that were coming up in the data, I think might be partially kind of addressed. But I think one big thing to kind of flag is that we're at the 2-year mark, sure, and there's a 2-year deadline, but you know what? We're going to blink and it's going to be the 3-year mark. And so like, start planning now so that it's not suddenly a scramble 3 months out and everybody panicking whether we're going to get another extension or what's going to happen or what that looks like. There is also still uncertainty with the insurance extension and the feeling that I think some people are feeling like the insurance extension is just for houses. They're not sure if that applies to businesses or if that's a blanket. So I think even just a bit more clarity around that could really help people. And then also the idea of just support, actually, honestly, with the dealing with adjusters and the insurance industry. They speak their own technical language, right, in insurance. And I know everybody's probably becoming more and more fluent than they ever wanted to be. But it might be helpful just to have some resources to help people understand even the discussions that are going on. Critical infrastructure and utilities, water, like holy cow, water. Like, and there's a lot of talk here about people want infrastructure in order to be able to kind of like connect their businesses. But I will say also that there was a pile of talk about looking, see if there's opportunities to do stuff like set up a gravity-fed water system, which is mentioned multiple times by people. So, if you build a cistern at an elevation and you slowly pump water into it for a period of time, when people are talking about water, what they're actually talking about is they want to have a water supply that is not dependent on mechanical pumps. It's not dependent on electricity. It doesn't have to be potable. They want water to be able to put sprinklers on their roof. They want water to be able to water the lawns. They want water to be able to green up all of Lytton so that way the fire resilience will go through the roof. And so it's something to consider because I know water treatment plants can get really expensive, but I think it's interesting to differentiate that, this doesn't have to be potable water by the sounds of it for most people. And so looking at stuff like that to increase water access and increase basically the dependability of the water access. Now, you already know that there's a lot underway on that. Like reading through all of the updates and reports and everything, I know there's stuff happening, which is really good, it's great because it means we're on the right track, but that's really what a lot of people are talking about. People feeling overwhelmed and lots of uncertainty. I mean, this is something that can be addressed through a number of different mechanisms. One of them is clearer communication. It's communicating to people what they need, what the information they are looking for is one of them. I think the other thing is starting to actually really map out relatively realistic timelines in an infographic that is easy for people to see. So people can start to look at this and they're not going to have to look at like this report and then this report and then this report and then this council update and then this something else and then this something else and then like overlaid in their brain over everything. And this is again where we have an economic recovery position coming up, and this would be a really great function of an economic recovery manager to be able to actually attend all these different things, pay attention to them, but then pull them together into a go-to kind of dashboard again, where people can see what's going on, because it's the uncertainty that is paralyzing people. People cannot make decisions with uncertainty. It's just human nature. And so the more certainty we can give in, I know, a very uncertain nature, and none of us have like a crystal ball, but even ballpark timelines around things can help people to plan. And when people are able to plan, that's when action happens. So yeah, and that's really, if you look at all these comments, they kind of speak to this effectively. There is a feeling of a lack of progress and timeline overall. And again, I think that we have built a detailed infographic timeline in the recovery report, which we're really happy to share with everybody when we have it approved by council and it is public. And I think we built that based on like some of those feedbacks. I think it will really help people to understand everything that's going on. And like I said before, people have not been sitting idle. There's just been this series of events that have been happening, and there's a lot of steps that are required on different fronts. And sometimes if people can't see that, like people, i.e., the residents in the region, they feel like nothing's happening. I think that is like human nature, is to assume that if they don't hear anything, then nothing's going on. But in actual fact, lots of stuff has been happening. But I think people need to know, okay, what is still yet to happen, and like when can we start to kind of see some progress on the stuff that they see day in and day out. And I will also comment that like technical people, like staff, council, and all the technical people on the call, you're probably actually looking through things through a lens. I know I am, where I've looked through everything, and I've done this. This is my job, right? And you're living and breathing it. But we always have to keep in mind that like residents they've got day jobs or they've got other things that they're doing. And so they don't have as full a picture as we have through all this. And the more simply we can kind of like display that picture for them, the better. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. There's lots of actually really cool opportunities and lots of really great ideas that are identified through this as well. And so people want to come back. Businesses want to come back. They're just waiting for the ability to do that. They are waiting with bated breath. There's also an opportunity with shared trauma. Like the community can pull together. There's actually science behind this where you get this you really get this camaraderie and this overall sense of community like you don't see sometimes in other communities. So we can leverage that. We can actually turn this to make us all stronger, make the village stronger. There's an opportunity to rebrand possibly the community. Is something that somebody mentioned, which is an interesting idea. I mean, it is, kind of a fresh start, really. Like the slate has been wiped clean in a lot of ways. It's kind of crazy that way. So maybe that's an opportunity. And Lytton has been capped and limited in the past because of housing shortages in older homes. This is changing because everything is being rebuilt. I think that what called to me on that one is that I do a lot of work on a volunteer basis around affordable housing in the province. And this is a provincial problem. And I can tell you that actually, if Lytton gets a lot of really good, innovative, affordable housing kind of coming out of this, it can actually position you in a way better place than a lot of the other communities in the province actually right now. Like affordable housing is a mega problem and everybody's looking for that solution. So maybe this is a real big opportunity that's kind of awaiting the silver lining, if you will. We also started to ask residents as well. We're like, we talked to them not only about like, what can we do now to help you recover? We actually started to look for ideas for improving economic resilience going forward. And there's a lot of really great ideas that came up. And some of these ideas are going to help the whole community when it comes to that uncertainty piece. So right away, the number one thing that was identified by a pile of people, build a community emergency plan. It's an excellent idea. You can also build a community recovery plan. And what this is we're building the economic recovery plan, but you can actually layer in a whole kind of plan for the future. And I actually see this as being a real opportunity, especially with the OCP possibly coming up. You can almost do like a modified OCP process if you are going to do an overall community plan. And you can actually integrate into that, building like a community recovery plan overall. And as part of that as well, build a community emergency plan. You're going to be doing piles of engagement with the community. And so why not get all these input and have everybody build this plan together? Bylaws to reduce fuel loads or increase fire resiliency. So this actually came up really high here, which is kind of funny because I know I always hear a lot of pushback on the bylaws, and there's some comments sometimes on some things. You guys say not so much. I think I probably heard the brunt of it, but I think it was a lot of the worry was around costs, right? But like there was actually lots of other ideas that were put out there where that were very low cost, but did increase that fire resiliency, which is really great. And so continuing to do that. So there's your support right there, the data right there, council, to keep doing that sort of stuff. Improve water infrastructure, already talked about that. Lots of awesome ideas around alternative water kind of systems or other ways to kind of access just more water and green the region up so that we increase our fire resilience. Better road or rail maintenance. So again, this is something you've probably all heard, but really this idea of actually starting to maybe work on advocacy or policy work to mandate stuff like the Ministry of Transportation or maybe the rail lines to be responsible for managing the brush around the rail, so that way that risk factor is really dropped down and really putting the onus onto the users to really be more responsible on that front. An emergency response center / better coordination. So the idea with these ideas are actually to like physically make a location, actually build a response center, an idea around that, because here's the reality of it. With climate change, these extreme weather events are not going away. The question is not, if something like this is going to happen again, or either to Lytton or the region, it's when. So why not be proactive? Why not be a leader? Build an emergency, like an actual concrete, like physical structure, emergency response center, be a hub for other communities that are impacted in the region. If something happens to Hope, if something happens to Kamloops, if something happens to Cache Creek, wouldn't it be amazing if you've been through this, you have maybe leftover temporary housing, maybe you've got your resiliency center, you've got everything set up that you can actually be an evacuation center and actually be set up to help other communities that are going through this. What a great idea. And so I love that. Also, sirens and muster stations. So people talked about an old bell that used to exist. I never heard it. I never saw this, but I guess there was a community bell, and people are saying, bring that stuff back. It's a great idea because it's, communication is a struggle. But back in the day, I guess if somebody rang that bell, everyone in the whole like kind of area could hear it, and everybody knew right away something big was happening, which is actually, that is a very low budget, very easy to do, and a great idea. Firefighting equipment and training. This is not just the fire trucks. I know we got the fire trucks, which is great, but this is also getting stuff like structural protection units. It's talking about, building an inventory around temporary water bladders that could be filled up, positioned at different locations with different pumps and hoses, and the idea of actually training community on the ability to use these sort of things. And instead of being dependent on, let's say, forestry or, just the fire truck, why not build up increased kind of resiliency and equipment? General awareness and education and community engagement. So people want to continue to be engaged. Like, there were some people that are saying, I got a little bit of the reaction of, oh, great, another survey. Although I'll have to say people really did a pretty amazing job at participating, and we got a lot of great feedback. And one of the things they said is don't stop it here. Like when we go back to building that community emergency plan or the community resiliency plan, they want to be a part of that. So we got to have continued ongoing community engagement. There has to be opportunities for people to be able to be a part of this plan going forward. Again, better communication we already brought up, and very specifically, people were talking about mandating slower train speeds for increased resiliency. And I don't know about the feasibility of that, but it was definitely there. So again, I don't want to take this entire meeting. I've already talked for too long. There's so much I do want to share. I'm really excited to release this report. It's going to go to council here tomorrow. And we're going to have council kind of review it before it's kind of released publicly. But there's also an opportunity after this presentation. We really want community, all of you who are on this call right now and who are part of the village council meeting, please take a moment. If there's anything you are thinking about or anything that you heard that you thought was wrong or something that was maybe missed, please take a moment and email Jamie. Me and Jamie are the project team that are working on this, and send us an email about anything that you're thinking about. The door is not closed, is still very much wide open right now for any kind of input, and we want to keep that door open until the very last minute if we can. So with that, I do not want to take up all of this evening, so I'm stopping. And sorry, my camera is not working.
No problem. Thank you so much, Colin. And I actually just got an email question asking if it was possible potentially to post your slides to the website.
Yeah, I have no problem at all with that. In actual fact, there was a very similar presentation that was done earlier, and Alba has a copy of that. And we're going to actually, I think, send to you, Jasmine, the updated slide deck from today. I'll do that maybe even tonight, right after this meeting.
Great. That sounds good. Thank you so much, Colin. Okay, next on the list here, we have Matt Lane joining us, and he's going to talk about a few different things about contaminated soils and archaeology reporting.
Thanks, Jasmine. Good to be here, everyone, tonight. Thanks very much. I'm calling in from the traditional and unceded territory of the Silk Okanagan people. For the environmental update, I'll keep things a little brief here, so there's time for questions afterwards. Environmental wise, IBI is continuing to work through their soils testing and identification through the village as material is removed and cleared out of the properties. They continue to take samples for their confirmatory testing, and they're providing updates to MatCon and AEW with which lots still need additional hotspot removals and which properties are environmentally cleared and ready for the archaeological shovel testing. Myself and James High from Colliers, we are meeting with IBI next week to actually determine if there's some additional efficiencies that we can put into play on the environmental side of things that may reduce some of the testing requirements. We're looking at going more into a risk-based approach rather than the numerical, but there'll be conversation with ourselves and then need to pass it on to MOE to see if it's something that is feasible. If so, we may not need to do as many confirmatory samples throughout the properties, which will speed things up by several weeks. That'll be next week that we're discussing that, and we're hoping that we can get some good feedback from IBI on it. For the archaeological side of the remediation program, AEW, they're continuing to work through the sifted materials from the hotspots throughout the village, as well as completing shovel testing on the villages that are environmentally remediated and cleared. The main focus right now is working through the priority properties and the southern end of the village where we have lots available. AEW has actually completed shovel testing on what properties are environmentally clear. So once we get the next update from IBI, we'll be moving into another batch of shovel testing while still working on our soil sifting concurrently. Currently, there are identified in the first report that's been submitted to the ARC branch, 20 properties that will require no further archaeological component for remediation. And AEW is working on their March monthly report for submission to the ARC branch by April 21st. And we should have response, and I don't want to put Paula on too much of a spot. We're hoping to see response from ARC branch on that by mid-May. And that would include approximately an additional 30 properties for final recommendation to proceed with backfill and handover to residents. AEW, they are now in their stage where they're providing or will be providing monthly reports by the third full week of every month to ARC branch for review and approval. Going forward with the first one going in for that April 21st timeframe. With that, the main comment is now that we do know that we have some properties that are ready for information to be shared with residents, and there will be more going in. I believe it was stated in the Lytton communication, but residents are encouraged to put their requests into ARC branch. So as information becomes available for their properties, it can be shared with them. Paula from Archaeology branch will be able to elaborate on that a little bit more. But we'll be able to start moving into that stage of recovery now. That is my update for today.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome.
Next on the list, we have Paula here, and she's joining us from the archaeology branch. Paula, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Paula Thorogood. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations with the Archaeology Branch, and I'm calling you this evening from the Lekwungen-speaking people of Songisa and Esquimalt in Vancouver or Victoria. I apologize in advance. I'm a little under the weather, so hopefully it's sultry radio voice and nothing else. So I'm just going to give you a very quick update. I could go into some of the more details, but I provided some in January as to the nature and the scope of the work. In short, due to the contamination of soils, sediments were collected, stockpiled, and screened. As a result of that stockpiling, we had a sense of approximately 90 properties that overlapped with archaeological sites, and AEW and potentially other archaeologists will be conducting subsurface testing within the site, within those lots that overlap with sites, in order to confirm whether or not the deposits are on that individual site, and if they are, the vertical and horizontal extent. So to learn more about the sites before we authorize impacts to those. To support the proposed backfilling or capping of imported fills on the properties, we have sought to amend the alteration permit that was issued to support the Village of Lytton. That is out for the final days with referral to the affected First Nation communities, and will be subject to a statutory decision after that. A reminder, an archaeological site is sites with physical evidence of human use or occupation prior to 1846, burial places with archaeological or historical value, or Aboriginal rock art. Automatic protection is applied to sites on private and public land, and archaeological sites are protected whether as yet unrecorded or known. So just because we may not know a site is in existence, it's still subject to protection. As well, sites are protected regardless of the level of disturbance. Further to the things that Matt had said, our timeline, we have received a report from AEW and another one is expected in mid-April. We expect the first batch of management direction letters will begin to go out next week. We do ask that people submit an information request to the archaeology branch. There is a link on the Lytton website, and we've been working with Lytton staff to have hard copies available in Boston Bar. You only have to submit an information request once. As we get updates for your property, we will already have the confirmation of how to get a hold of you in order to share updates as to whether you need to have further work done on your site, and if so, when that work has been completed. We'll also speak with the Village of Lytton in terms of getting them the advice for summaries for when properties are ready to be backfilled so that they can make those plans accordingly. So just in short, reports are coming in. We're going to be giving those property specific advice to owners as they send in information requests, and we'll also look to give the village the summaries of which lots are ready for backfilling activities.
Great. Thanks so much, Paula. And thanks for being here when you're not feeling well too.
That's okay.
I appreciate it. Oh no.
Sorry. Almost made it through.
It was my fault. I made you laugh.
Okay.
All right. So thank you to all of our speakers tonight. We're now going to open it up to all questions for any of our speakers or village staff. So if you have a question, please use the chat box and we'll go through them until we run out of time tonight. Or if you want to say your question out loud, that would be great. Just use the raise hand button on Zoom at the bottom of your screen under reactions. So I didn't receive any questions in advance. So I'll move right on over to all of you. So I see Mayor O'Connor, I believe you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a few questions, but I'm going to start with Paula, you mentioned, I tried to follow what you were saying, but you mentioned something about amendment to a permit and it's out to First Nation communities. Can you elaborate on that, or what you were talking about there?
Yeah. Heritage Conservation Act permits and amendments most amendments are referred to descendant communities prior to a statutory decision. So because this amendment has a change to what is being authorized to impact sites, that is to permanently cap them, we've referred that to First Nations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor O'Connor. I don't see any other hands up or questions in the chat, so if you have any others, please feel free.
I do. I want to know, when I drive through Lytton, and I don't know if it's you or Matt that can share this, but when I drive through Lytton and I see all the different flags on sticks, and I don't know what they mean. Some are orange. I've seen sticks with blue flags, I think. Is anybody able to explain what those are? Thank you, Matt.
So the flags that you would be seeing across the properties themselves are identification flags for environmental contaminants. Nothing on the archaeological would be identified in order to deter anyone from attempted grave robbing and so on. The blue flags that you would see within the stockpiles of soils, those are identifications for the archaeology team to know which property those piles came from. So there won't be an identification of what's actually in there. That is confidential due to the archaeology component. But the blue ones are just location from materials, and the rest that are spread through the village are the environmental contaminations and identifications where they've done more hotspot works and where material needs to be removed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Matt. I see Councillor McCann, you have your hand up.
There we go. Yep, this is for Matt too. In the last day or so, Matt, driving through town, all of a sudden there are piles of dirt everywhere. And this looks like different dirt. Isn't it amazing? Like I'm getting so I can recognize different dirt now. Nonetheless, it's got me really curious. What on earth is going on? Why are all these new piles of dirt suddenly showing up in town? Where did it all come from, and what's going on with it? Like, what's that all about?
So the material that is starting to stockpile up, that is more of the hotspot materials, primarily from zones 1 through 4. So MatCon's main focus right now is to get the last little bit of remediated or contaminated material out of those properties from those zones, so we can get the final confirmatory sampling completed, as well as get the last bit of archaeological sifting done through zones 1 and 4, and have properties ready for final shovel testing by the ARC department. You're seeing so much of it right now, just based on the budget that we're working with. We're putting the focus on getting it out of the ground rather than getting it out of the village at the moment. But it will be shipped out of here once it is sifted and cleared to move.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase what I think I just heard you say, okay? So they're digging dirt out of properties that were already dug out once, but this is a new dig out of the same properties and putting it in to a different place so that we can look at it and make sure that it has been identified as toxic. That's why it's being dug out, first of all. Yes?
That's correct. So
Okay,
go ahead.
So it was identified as toxic after like the first layer came off. This is like the second layer now, and it's got toxins in it. So it has to go too. And before it can go, archaeology has to go through it and make sure they're all good with it to go as well. Correct? And then at some point in time in the future, it'll all get trucked into a big truck and taken to some wonderful place where it all gets to live forever. Yes? Okay. Wow. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Councillor McCann. Are there any other questions for our speakers tonight? Maybe 30 more seconds in case somebody is typing in the chat. Mayor O'Connor.
Yes, this one's for Matt. So again, you were talking and I was trying to figure it all out. But you said there are 20 properties that have no remediation needed. And then you talked about another 30. So does this mean that we'll have 50 properties ready by May, April or May?
Are 20 properties identified as no more work being required approximately. That would have been in the first report that is just being finalized with ARC Branch. And the next report that'll be going in April from AEW will contain the 30 other additional properties that they have shovel tested. And so we will have recommendations on those ones in order to proceed with additional work or backfill. The extent of what that recommendation is can't be disclosed to myself, just being the property, not being the property owner, and it needs to go through ARC Branch for their review and comments prior. But we would be looking at potentially up to 50 properties ready for next steps in May.
Okay, so I guess I misheard you there, but for sure there's a good 20 properties though that are ready to go.
And I believe Paula may be able to comment on that from what
Yeah.
you see.
That's those are the recommendations. Those are under final review. And then, as I said, the people who have submitted information requests will be advised as such. I believe we've received information requests for 20 properties. We'll be looking and providing some feedback on that next week. And when the next report comes in mid-April, we anticipate having some further, having a better sense as to what's happened after the remediation in January, February, and providing response to that as well. And that would probably be in May.
Okay, thank you. Did I just hear you say you've received requests for information from 20 properties?
Yeah, 20 properties have submitted the information requests that we've asked people to do so that we can confirm their contact information and property ownership. So there's still a fair number that we haven't received them for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I'll just give it a few more minutes here in case there's any other hands up or any other comments in the chat. Councillor Lytton.
This question, thank you. This question's for Matt, and I'm just wondering if you could go over your comments regarding meeting with Ministry of Environment next week and the change of criteria regarding soil contamination. You spoke quickly and I didn't catch it all. Thank you.
So I will be meeting with IBI next week to discuss some potential efficiencies in order to reduce the testing requirements. We may be able to take another kind of route through secondary testing. So as of right now, the initial remediation happens. We do a round of confirmatory testing. If there's any hotspots, those hotspots are removed, and then IBI would have to do another round of confirmatory testing, rinse and repeat. There is a potential that we may be able to take a risk-based approach where after we do the testing, depending on how high the levels are of contamination and depending on how deep the property may be backfilled, we may not require that additional testing and additional removals, but that's something that needs to be reviewed with IBI, and then they need to be able to take that over to MOE to make sure that it's still going to be within compliancy. Yeah.
And so do you have an idea of the timeline to get a decision on that process?
I do not. I will have a bit more information next week. I have done something similar in the past at a much smaller scale. And it's really just as long as you have environmental sign off, an environmental consultant needs to put their name to it saying that they agree and they agree with the risk involved. But at a larger scale, and again, it's very, very property specific depending on what your levels of contamination are. So I will have more information on that next week, and I can bring that in to one of my updates during one of the next council meetings to give council an update.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Matt. I have a question in the chat here and maybe just a bit of a clarification. So not too sure if this is for you, Paula or Matt, but So Village of Lytton states that priority lots will be cleared first. The ARC branch is not saying this. How will the order of return to property be started?
So the priority properties, we are working through them as the priority if and when they become available. And when the request that they are added to the priority list becomes available. If there was a property requested yesterday to become a priority property, it won't make it onto this next report or the first report coming into April, just based on the time frame. But as we move through things, we can be doing the hotspot removal and then the testing on a priority property. When we do the testing, there's a 2-week delay waiting for the test results to come back, in which case we would be working on other properties. So depending on what test results are on a property, we may have to do additional round of testing. And so a property that may be priority may not be completed until after a property that's not priority, just based on contamination levels and amount of material that requires removal. But they are the priority. We are moving through those ones first when available and moving from there.
Can you clarify? There's just a question. What do you mean become available? Can you just clarify that point?
Being around the timeframes for the actual test results themselves. So once we do our testing on them, we have 2 weeks where we can't do any of the work on that property while we wait for the test results to come back, in which case it will identify if and where additional removals may need to be done on those properties. So we may remove half of a property's worth of contamination in that first round. And then the next test would identify that. We'd remove more. And if there's anything else, we still have to wait until the test results come back and we can map out exactly where the bit of contamination sits.
Thanks, Matt. And Colin, I see your hand up. Do you have anything to add?
Actually, I had a question for Matt more than anything. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this, because I wonder if people are not fully understanding what you're saying even right now, actually, on the line. I'm just thinking about this. So I feel like the questions that are really kind of being asked is, when can somebody realistically, I know there's varying degrees of varying lots and they're all over. When realistically could somebody actually start rebuilding on one of their lots? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that. Because that's just like this. I think that's what people are kind of trying to drill down to. So I know you've given timelines with ARC and other things and soil contamination, but like, I know they can possibly feed into other processes as well. So I think like, when is the earliest somebody could actually build on their lot would be my question.
So after this first report is approved by ARC branch, so when we're looking into that mid-May timeframe, we would be expecting that we can begin backfilling some of these properties and releasing them back to the residents. However, that is going to be contingent on funding. As long as we have the funding to continue moving through that, we can proceed. If the funding is not available, there will be a delay. But the actual ARC and environmental side of things, we would be seeing properties potentially being released by that mid-May time period.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor McCann, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Jasmine. So I think we're probably still with you, Matt. You talked about the IBI process and the surveying for contaminants and testing and so on. And my thought was, where do the residents get included in all this? Do people get told what contaminants are found on their property? Do they get told the nature? Do they have any say in whether or not they want to just call her quits and say, hey, I'm willing to take the risk at this point in time. Don't worry about going any further. Like, have they any options there? Or is this just, you got to do it because it's the law?
The properties will be identified as a contaminated site, and in order to build on it, to sell it, that has to be registered as such. So working through this removal process, when things are done, IBI will be providing those certificates to identify that it is environmentally cleared. There's no environmental risk or issue on this property. If a resident were to not want to proceed any further with the remediation process, they would need to identify themselves with the village to say that they would want out. I think I would need to speak more with the CAO Baker on that specific process. But in which case, any environmental remediations and archaeology would then now be falling on the owner themselves to mitigate. But with the building permit process, you have to identify that your property is not environmentally contaminated in order to proceed with your building permit. If you want to sell your property, you have to identify whether or not it's a contaminated property or not. And there's implications on that to move forward.
Yeah. Thank you. You clarified that quite well. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. We have one question in the chat, probably again, either for you, Matt or Paula. So if a property is not on the priority list, but they do need archaeology or contamination removal, where are they on the list?
So we are moving from the southern end of the village, moving forward to the north. It was based on, at the very start of the process, the winds, just to ensure that we're working on the south end, so we don't have workers working in the wind from potentially contaminated dusts and debris in the air. And we're continuing just moving through that south to north process, which means that the zone 7 may be some of the last properties that would become available, but it all depends on what is found on the properties, the environmental contamination levels. There might be properties in zone 7 that are cleared quicker than something in around the 4th zone, just based on their contamination level, but it's primarily from south to north.
Great, thanks so much. And Councillor Doss, did I see your hand up or did I miss that?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I really didn't want to speak tonight. I feel a little meetinged out, and we had a budget meeting last night, and we had a pretty sobering presentation by our recovery CFO, and it looks like we're out of money. And so this question, I mean, as far as the remediation and removal of soil and backfilling and testing and archaeology are all concerned, from what I understood, we're about 24 million shy. So you're speaking of work being done now, Matt, and I'm very confused because I've heard work has halted because there is no more funding. So perhaps you can clarify that for me, because is what we're doing right now paid for? Because I'm a little confused on that. You're speaking about, getting an environmental consultant in to streamline the IBI process. And I'm wondering who's going to pay for this environmental consultant? Is this money we're still going to be asking from the province? Or is this money that was already allocated when we approved the last 9 million? Thank you.
Funding that we are using currently, the works that are being done on site right now, that is funded, money is available. The additional funding that is required is for works essentially past the end of April. So the additional works of the environmental consultant, they are the lowest risk in terms of funding available based on their contract. Having discussions with them next week in order to reduce the actual scope in around what we may want to do, that is within the budget that we are operating in currently. But
Thanks. So to be clear, Matt, maybe I didn't quite understand your answer. Are we bought and paid for right now for what you're doing on site?
yes, we have the funding available for the commitments that we currently have.
The funding is available
It's available, yes.
from the province. They've said that they will pay for these additional costs, or that's what we've already approved.
The current contracts and the works that we're currently doing is through the funding that has already been provided by the province, and that will take us to that end of April timeframe. So the approved works that we're currently working through is funded. The village has the funding available to pay invoices.
Could we have a list of those approved works?
I believe Recovery Finance Officer Bo Gill provided a list of that last night. Bo, there you are.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the question, Councillor Toss. In the presentation yesterday, there was a list of works that council has approved, and those resolution numbers are listed beside each of the works that were brought before prior councils. And I'm sorry, the presentation is not a clickable presentation, but if you refer to each of those council meetings through the agendas, those reports are there as to how that works was presented and the timelines associated with it, along with the rationale for the works, and those works were all approved. And just following up on the earlier question that Matt has answered, that answer is correct. The work that is currently being carried out is through the funding that was identified in the presentation as already received. However, some new information has come to light that the current works are funded. However, at the end of April, maybe when we are then looking at the contractors potentially moving offsite due to us not being able to commit to works beyond the end of April. So I hope that, does that answer your question, Councillor Toss?
Yes, to some degree. Now I'm just wondering if has the soil being replaced on the properties been covered regardless of this timeline? Like, that's a lot of infill we're talking about. And I'm wondering if that is accounted for. If it's in one of the details of one of the council meetings, I apologize, but do you perhaps know that, Matt? Has the backfill been paid for?
Phil's not. That is part of the funding request that would be going to the province.
So we took the soil out, but we can't put it back in. That's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Bo, for that response. I don't see any other hands up at this point. Oh, I do see a follow-up question in the chat, probably for Matt here. Just circling back to clearance for property owners. So will someone tell the property owner we are clear to go? So will someone physically reach out to each property owner to tell them that they're good to go?
So that would fall, a portion of that will fall under their request to the archaeology branch to receive the notification of updates on their property for the archaeological side. When properties are finally backfilled and complete, the village would need to take on the notification that backfill and all remediation is complete and pulled off of the property.
Thanks, Matt. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or hands up. I'll just give it maybe another few seconds just to see if there's any remaining questions for anyone on the call. Councillor Lightfoot.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Matt, what I think I heard you say was once the ARC branch has given clearance to the lot, they will advise the owner. They will also advise you, and you will arrange for the backfill. And then the village will notify the owner once the lot is ready to go. Is that the process?
We are working with ARC Branch, so with Paula right now, just to finalize the notification from ARC Branch to the village side of things. But yes, the residents would be receiving essentially two notifications. The first being the ARC side of it, that archaeology is clear, or here's your next steps on the archaeology. And then we would be looking to receive notification as well that a property is cleared for backfilling. In which case, when we do move forward with that, we would then be able to notify the property owner that backfilling is also completed.
So I'm still not clear. You will receive information from the ARC branch that you can go ahead and backfill?
So what we're doing is we're proposing to send a letter to the private property owners and give a summary to the village to advise these are the following properties that have no further concerns for archaeological or have low risk of additional archaeological materials.
Okay, so then the village would have the responsibility to advise your group, Matt, or whoever is responsible for the backfill. So the village needs to be timely in advising you that, hey, things are looking good, fill it up, please, right? Okay.
I mean, for
I
that
will-
letter, given that we're not giving any we can CC we can CC something like Colliers, but that could be something that we could discuss in terms of making sure that a piece of paper isn't going through multiple hands if we
Great.
can all agree on who the distribution list should include.
Perfect. Yes.
I will add, there have been a couple property owners that have requested their properties not be backfilled. And so in the case of those properties, we will reference between what is approved to backfill and who's requested not to have that, and then pass the notification on that remediation now is complete. Backfill has not occurred. However, the property is now ready for the homeowner to take back over.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And I believe that answers the question in the chat that was about who would be communicating directly with residents. So that's great. And Mayor O'Connor, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I have a question for Paula. You've only heard from 20 properties requesting the information. And am I correct that going online is the only way to request that information, or is there a phone number or something that people that aren't tech savvy could use to request the information?
No, you cannot use a phone number. You have to sign a piece of paper. So if the online option, the Village of Lytton has it on their website, we have it on our website. If you write our email address, you get a notification of how to do it. But we've also been working with Lytton staff in order to make hard copies available for those who may not have access to online options through your Boston Bar location.
Well, that's good to hear, but it'll just be a matter of communicating that out then to those people that are living around the province. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paula. Any other final questions for our speakers or staff tonight? Give it a couple more seconds in case somebody is typing in the chat quickly, but Councillor McCann.
I'll just take a moment right now while people are thinking to say, I'm feeling way more hopeful now than I was an hour and a half ago. I was filled with dread that there was going to be another horrible thing getting in the way of people actually moving home soon. And Matt and Paula, I really want to thank you for the efforts that you're making. And I understand that it is quite significant what you're doing for people trying to move this ahead, and it just can't move fast enough. We all know that, but thank you. I feel a little more hopeful than I had felt.
Thanks, Councillor McCann. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, so I'll move to start wrapping up the meeting at this point then. Before I turn it over to Mayor O'Connor for closing remarks, I just want to let you know the date of the next community meeting. So please save the dates in your calendar. The next meeting will be Thursday, April 20th. So we'll get that posted to the website as soon as possible, but please mark that in your calendars. And on that note, I will turn it over to Mayor O'Connor.
Thank you, Jasmine. And thank you everyone for attending tonight. I wrote myself a few notes here, and just a couple of things are, Ryan, thanks so much for the information on what the United Way is doing and supporting the healing initiatives. So I think we're all going to mark April 20th and April 22nd on our calendars for those events. Thank you for that. And Colin, again, your economic recovery plan, I look forward to reading the 100 pages of the full report. But of course, I did take away, I think, from what you said, it's really important that there's a coordinated approach to this economic recovery and to bring back the people, the homes rebuilt, as well as the businesses at once. One can't come before the other, and I think that's a really, really critical message. And Matt and Paula, thank you. As Councillor McCann said, thank you for that. Listening to you today does give me a bit more hope as well. What I think a message to share out to the residents that are listening today, particularly property owners, please go online, or we'll somehow manage to get you the paper copies to request the information for archaeology. And if you know people that aren't on the meeting tonight that need to do that, it's really important that we get that word out to everybody to get on there and get that request for information. I know I went on and did it myself. It's not a very difficult process once you go on the link and fill that out. So thank you for that. Yeah, and that does bring us to the end of the meeting. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. Jasmine.
Thanks, Mayor O'Connor. So that concludes today's meeting. We will be doing another Q&A document. So all the questions and answers will be written up and then posted to the website. But as always, this meeting was live streamed and is posted permanently to our YouTube page. And there will be a link on the website as well in case you missed it or you want to pass the information on to anybody else. So that brings us to the end of the evening. Thank you all so much for attending. If you have any additional questions, please email communication@lytton.ca. Thanks so much.
Night, everyone.